I know, that title probably sounds absolutely absurd to some of you right now, but I promise you, after you're done watching this video, you'll realize that it really isn't that crazy of a statement. Just take a look at this graph. The y-axis represents the greatest single seasons ever according to Basketball Reference's all-in-one box plus minus metric. The x-axis represents the greatest single seasons according to Thinking Basketball's version of box plus minus. Put simply, these metrics are designed to measure a player's on-court impact, or essentially, how valuable a player is to his team by using stats from only the box score. So on this graph, you're basically seeing the greatest statistical regular seasons after the NBA and ABA merger in 1976. You'll see some prime Magic and Bird seasons from the late 80s at the bottom, then some more recent seasons from James Harden and the Greek Freak in their MVP years near the middle. Finally, most of the top single seasons ever are just the best versions of LeBron and Michael Jordan throughout their careers, along with 2016 Steph, of course. But these metrics suggest that Nikola Jokic is also in that tier and has been right on the level of a 91 MJ or a 2013 LeBron in the past 5 regular seasons. And his last 3 years in particular look somewhat like outliers even when compared to the best of the best. Jokic's 2023, 2024, and 2025 seasons are the 3 most impactful regular seasons ever according to Thinking Basketball's BPM, which dates back to 1955. And according to Basketball Reference's model, he also holds the top season ever in 5 out of the top 7. Just an absolutely absurd statistical footprint. Obviously, these metrics have their flaws since they only use stats from the box score to measure impact. This overstates Jokic's value on the defensive end since the box score can't really tell if a player is an impactful defender or not. Jokic racks up a bunch of rebounds and stocks, but as we know, struggles to protect the rim and guard the arc with his lack of quickness and vertical pop. Nonetheless, the box score is usually very good at capturing offensive impact, and Jokic's offensive box plus minus is right on par with 2016 Steph Curry, who was arguably the gold standard for offensive impact. It's not just the box score that suggests that Jokic is a GOAT level player though. Over the last 3 seasons, Jokic has an on-off rating of 21.7, meaning the Nuggets are almost 22 points better every 100 possessions with Jokic on the floor compared to when he goes to the bench. That is the highest swing over a 3-year span since the NBA started tracking plus minus in 1996. This metric does lack a little bit of context though, because it matters who Jokic is on the floor with when he's on the court. Also, the Nuggets have not had a playable backup center in Jokic's prime, so this kind of inflates his on-off swing when he's off the floor. But when all the numbers are saying the same thing, it probably does mean something. And I know it's hard to think about Jokic being in the same tier as MJ and LeBron, but again, when all the data is constantly suggesting this, it's hard not to put him in those talks. Jokic is currently top 3 in points, rebounds, and assists per game this season, and is first in 3-point percentage at almost 50%. He's averaging a near 32-point triple-double while having a true shooting percentage of 64.2, or in other words, about 7 percentage points better than league average. For comparison's sake, in Russell Westbrook's triple-double season in 2017, he averaged 32 points but had a true shooting percentage of just 55.4, which was about league average at the time. Jokic, however, has scored at a volume and efficiency that has literally only been matched by 3 players since the merger. He, along with Steph, KD, and Michael Jordan, are the only players to eclipse 31 points per game while shooting more than 6.5% above league average efficiency. And as we know, Jokic's scoring isn't even his best offensive trait, yet he's essentially putting up peak Kevin Durant scoring numbers on a per game basis. But alright, enough with all the numbers and charts. Like KD said himself, who the wants to look at graphs while having a hoop convo? Let's dive into some film now. The people who say Jokic only wins MVPs because of his advanced metrics are just giving away that they don't actually watch him play, or they're just blind. We'll start with where Jokic does most of his scoring, which is in the paint. Jokic is arguably the best post scorer ever. His combination of strength, footwork, and touch is nothing like we have ever seen. He has scored at an absurd rate of 1.18 points per possession on post-ups over the last 3 seasons. For comparison's sake, the league average post-up efficiency is about 0.98 points per possession. Standing at 7 foot and weighing 285 pounds, there are not many guys who can physically match up with the Joker. Jokic's go-to move is his right-handed hook shot over his left shoulder. He's great at using his large frame to bump defenders down low to create separation. Valanciunas is a big guy himself, but Jokic puts his shoulder into him and completely bumps him off his spot. He also has a 7'3" wingspan, which helps him to get these shots off with ease despite barely getting off the floor when jumping. On this one, he gives Sabonis a little shimmy before getting to that right-handed hook shot. Jokic can operate from the block, but can also just walk his man down from the top of the key and dribble into a post-up where he's just as lethal. He uses multiple pivots to get his defender leaning one way before turning back the other way to hit his hook shot. Jokic usually uses the jump hook off 2 feet, but is very capable of hitting running hook shots off 1 foot like he does here. The Joker has shot 56% on these hook shots this season, and that's very impressive because most of these shots are from about 5 to 8 feet from the basket. Jokic is even more efficient if you look at just his right-handed hook shots, as he shot over 60% on them this year. It's with his left hand that he has really struggled with, as he shot just 1 of 8 this season. Most of his misses are when he's forced to turn back and shoot over his right shoulder, which he's not as comfortable doing. Luckily for Jokic, he's still strong enough to manage to get to that right hook about 90% of the time, even if the opposing defense is forcing him to the left. So in reality, there's pretty much nothing a defense can do to defend this shot, except pray that he misses. Jokic is shooting an absurd 53% from the mid-range this season on about 10 attempts per game. This makes him pretty much unguardable because there's nothing an opposing rim protector can do since he doesn't need to get all the way to the rim to finish these shots. We already talked about his hook shot, but he also has that same soft touch on his floaters and jumpers as well. This is why he's been able to score at a rate of 1.35 points per possession as the roll man in pick and rolls, despite being vertically limited. That mark ranks first in the NBA with players who average at least 3 possessions per game as the roll man. Most big men aren't able to effectively finish outside of the restricted area on rolls to the basket, but this is where Jokic thrives. The Hawks rotate perfectly to protect the rim, but Jokic just stops about 7 feet from the basket and nails the floater. This ability to hit these floaters is also important when teams switch and Jokic gets a mismatch with a smaller guard on him. The defense isn't able to help because Jokic can stop in that short mid-range area and effortlessly shoot over smaller defenders. This soft touch also extends out to his jump shots. The Nuggets actually run off-ball screening actions to get him open jumpers, and it helps that he can get his jump shot off over anyone because of his over-the-head, catapult-like form. Denver loves this look where he starts at the elbow and comes off a cross screen for the mid-range jumper. And this segues us into the next part of Jokic's game that I want to talk about, which is his off-ball movement. Whether it's screening for others or coming off screens himself, Jokic is always moving. It's almost like Curry, but instead of running around the three-point line, he's cutting and screening around the paint and mid-range area. It actually reminds me a lot of how Larry Bird used to operate off the ball. Jokic is always looking for angles and openings to cut or seal his defender for easy baskets. This is part of the reason why he's so efficient. He has absolutely perfected this basket cut, where he runs towards the ball handler, acting like he's about to set a screen, but instead quickly slips it into a cut to the basket. This is effective because of Jokic's IQ and feel for the game, along with his ability to read screens. If you watch closely, Jokic is kind of jogging, but that quick burst and change of speeds completely catches his defender off guard, and is why he's able to slip through for the layup. Most of the great scorers in NBA history somewhat take away from their teammates because of their ball dominance. Jokic is different though. He leads the league in touches by a pretty wide margin, but is just 36th in time of possession, meaning he's making quick decisions with the ball, whether it's shooting or passing, and is the complete opposite of a black hole on offense. If you look at average time of possession per touch, you'll see ball-dominant guards like Jalen Brunson or James Harden at the top of the league with about 6 seconds every touch. Jokic, on the other hand, holds the ball for about 3 seconds every touch, which doesn't even rank in the top 200 of the league. This type of quick decision-making and movement-based offensive play style makes him one of the most scalable offensive superstars in NBA history. In my opinion, this is what slightly separates him and Steph from LeBron offensively. While peak LeBron might be a slightly better floor raiser, meaning he can take average teams to near championship level heights, Jokic and Steph can fit seamlessly with other great players since their style of play is more compatible with other ball-dominant stars. So not only can you make the argument that Jokic is arguably the greatest offensive floor raiser ever because of his great on-ball scoring and playmaking, you can also make the argument that Jokic is one of the best off-ball offensive superstars in NBA history because of his constant movement and screening, along with his quick decision-making and connective passing, which we'll get into right now. I've heard people say that Jokic's style of play is boring to watch, which I can somewhat see if you're just talking about his scoring attack, but I can't possibly understand how you can watch some of these passes I'm about to show you and not jump out of your seat. Everyone says that Jokic is the best passing big man of all time, but that is completely underrating his ability. In my opinion, he's the best passer of all time, regardless of position. Obviously, you're splitting hairs when comparing him to all-time greats like Magic, Bird, and LeBron, but he is 100% on that Mount Rushmore of pure passers. Jokic is one of the few players in NBA history that can truly make every pass in the book. His height and length enable him to hit passing angles that others are simply not physically capable of hitting. Just look at this pass as he drives baseline and whips a no-look laser right in the shooting pocket to MPJ for the triple. And then this one is just absurd. I mean, what in the world even was that? Jokic's ability to whip these one-handed passes across the court is just insane. Here, MPJ curls the screen and the initial passing angle isn't open, so Jokic pivots and rifles a bounce pass from the other side instead. And again, it's his length and wingspan that enables him to throw that pass around his defender. Jokic is capable of throwing these wraparound passes with either hand, as he does here with his left hand to Brown off the slip. This is why it's almost impossible to double team Jokic because he can see over the defense and always finds the open man. On this one, he picks up his dribble and looks like he is stranded in the corner, but Brown makes a great cut in space and Jokic whips a cross-court one-handed pass to him for the layup. And it's the same thing here. Jokic picks up his dribble and scans the floor. Westbrook cuts, and Jokic knows that means D'Lo has to rotate, so he pivots baseline and throws a ridiculous pass to Christian Braun in the corner. This time, the Knicks trap him once he turns his back on the spin move, but Jokic still somehow sees Murray and hits him right on the money for the triple. Denver mainly uses Jokic as a passing and screening hub at the top of the key to initiate their offense. Jokic's ability to operate and hit cutters from the perimeter is so valuable because it pulls the opposing rim protector out of the paint. This makes cutting and finishing at the rim much easier for Jokic's teammates and is the reason why Denver is able to generate very efficient offense without being a good three-point shooting team. The Nuggets non-shooters also do a very good job of cutting in open space when Jokic gets doubled, and Jokic almost always finds them for the layup. Jokic consistently catches defenders off guard by hitting tight passing angles that many players would never even think of throwing. These types of assists are so valuable because they lead to layups, which is the most efficient shot in the game. And these layups aren't heavily contested either because there is no rim protector in the paint like I explained before. On this one, Jokic throws this pass before Strawther even gets separation on his defender. Jokic is great at taking advantage of defenders who have their back turned when guarding cutters, as he hits Brown here on the slip for the layup. You would think defenses should be in help off the Nuggets non-shooters like Gordon, Brown, and Westbrook to limit these slips and backdoor cuts, but these guys have vertical gravity, meaning they position themselves in the dunker position or in the short corner for the lob threat. This means that their defender can't necessarily leave them alone because they can utilize that open space with a basket cut or an alley-oop. It's kind of like a less spaced out version of the Warriors offense, whereas both teams use non-shooters as screeners and cutters to take advantage of the open space. In Golden State's offense, Draymond excelled at making decisions in the short roll with his connective passing. Jokic does the same thing, but is even better, and can actually score like we talked about earlier. He processes defenses so quickly and always makes the right read. And just like every great passer, he is a master at manipulating defenders with his eyes. This, paired with his patience as a passer, is why he's able to generate so many high-value assists, or in other words, passes that lead to layups and dunks. Here, he gets the ball in the short roll and is staring down MPJ in the corner, just waiting for the help defender to take one step off of Watson in the dunker spot. And I think this pass actually fools Watson a little bit too, as he starts to back up before catching it. Jokic's ability to map the floor and quickly process defenses is second to none. Not only is Jokic a master at passing in the short roll, he's also a master at passing as the pick and roll ball handler. Denver loves to run inverted pick and rolls because again, that brings the opposing big man to the perimeter and opens up the paint. They especially love to run these in semi-transition situations where the defense isn't set up yet. Jokic is great at using his manipulation skills to freeze help defenders by looking at the shooter in the corner before hitting the roll man. He has also perfected waiting until his defender starts to recover back to the ball before hitting the roll man in that split second before the defense can fully switch back. And again, that goes back to his patience and feel for the game. To sum it up, Jokic can pretty much make any pass in the book at any angle on the floor. Not only is he one of the most accurate and fun to watch passers ever, he's one of the most versatile passers ever. It doesn't matter if he's being doubled in the post, acting as a passing hub at the top of the key, or if he's the ball handler in the pick and roll. He's going to use his height, length, and manipulation skills to make the right read and find the open man 99% of the time. And there's just nothing the defense can do about it. And I didn't even mention his outlet passing or ability to lead the break and push the ball in transition. He can do that too. So if he's one of the most efficient shot makers ever, and arguably the best passer ever, what exactly do you do to stop him? Well, nothing. That's the reason that the Nuggets have an NBA best 127 offensive rating when the Joker's on the floor. And another thing with Jokic is his consistency. What gives him the edge offensively over peak Steph in my opinion is that his game is not dependent on his three-point shooting at all. Jokic can have a playoff series where he shoots 20% from 3 and still averages 30 plus, whereas Steph and many other all-time great offensive players are much more volatile than Jokic because they depend way more on their outside shot. And as we know, three-point shooting is much more volatile than layups and mid-range scoring. So Steph essentially has the highest offensive ceiling ever on a game-to-game basis, but Jokic probably has the highest offensive floor in NBA history. And when you're splitting hairs in terms of GOAT offensive impact, this matters. I prefer to have a less volatile player because in the playoffs, it's easy to go cold from 3 for a few games, and that can determine the outcome of a whole series. But it's almost impossible to go cold from inside the paint, which is where Jokic and the Nuggets in general do most of their scoring from. So, to sum it all up, Jokic's combination of strength, GOAT-level touch around the basket and from the mid-range, off-ball movement, GOAT-level passing versatility and IQ, and overall consistency make him, in my opinion, the best offensive player ever. Now I know you guys are probably wondering, what about his defense? I think the metrics clearly overstate his defensive impact, like I said at the start of the video, but I don't really think he's a negative on that end of the floor either, like many fans tend to think. Sure, he's not very athletic at all, and doesn't offer any sort of verticality at the rim. We know his limitations by now. But at the end of the day, the Nuggets have been an above average defense 3 out of the last 5 seasons, so ultimately, he can't be that detrimental on that end of the floor. This also goes back to his offensive brilliance and him not necessarily needing traditional spacing around him. This means that the Nuggets have been able to put more defensive-minded players around him, and Mike Malone has done a great job of implementing an effective defensive system. But Jokic does also provide some value himself defensively, which in my opinion makes him a neutral or even a slight positive on that end of the floor. First off, he's massive, so he takes up a lot of space in the paint. Pair that with his IQ and him always being in the right spot, that at least gives him subtle rim protection. Jokic isn't going to challenge anyone vertically at the rim, but his length and quick hands actually generate a ton of deflections and steals. It's still not great, but it's his version of protecting the rim, given his physical limitations. And then finally, he's arguably the best rebounder in the league. People might overlook this, but securing possessions does matter, especially come playoff time. So at the end of the day, you have this guy, who's arguably the most impactful offensive player of all time, and probably close to a neutral on defense. So where exactly does his peak rank historically? I'm not gonna lie, the title was somewhat clickbait. I don't think Jokic is quite at the level of MJ or LeBron, even if the metrics say he is. Jordan and LeBron were arguably just as good as Jokic offensively, but provided a good amount of impact defensively as well. But after those two, I think he has a real argument for the third highest peak that the NBA has ever seen. Wow, this was a long one, and if you're still watching, I really appreciate it. Here's a quick summary of everything we went over in this breakdown. Leave a comment below on where you think this version of Nikola Jokic ranks all time. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.